And good evening. I'd like to welcome you to yet another edition of the Columbus Report. It is March 11th, which means it is Monday evening, and it's time to discuss all things your area of Ohio. And tonight, we're very fortunate to have the 29th District, and that meaning here for his inaugural debut at the round table, Mr. Lewis Blessing III from your district, the 29th. Mr. Blessing, glad you could join us.
Thank you. My pleasure.
You know, like I said, this will be your inaugural debut, so no too nervous of jitters. We're going to make this as quick and painless as possible, but we're going to have a good time as well.
That's good.
Get small information out there.
Sure.
So if you are joining us on March 11th, I hope you have sprung forward and are joining us at 8 o'clock. If not, you're behind. But if so, and you are joining us here on March 11th, it is March 11th, give us a call, 825-3971, or give us a little ring on the email, live@waycross.org. All questions will be answered here tonight. Well, Mr. Blessing, glad you could join us, as I said earlier. And, of course, most people are going, Mr. Blessing, that's not the same Mr. Blessing. You are the third, of course, which, of course, your father was Lewis Blessing, Jr., who also had the same seat as you do.
That's correct.
And so the question has to ask, is it in that dynasty to join forward and go for
Ooh, I don't know if I'd call it a dynasty. The opportunity definitely presented itself. I mean, I'm an engineer by trade, so getting into politics is definitely new for me. But just based on, the fact that the seat was open, I had the name recognition, I had always followed politics at particularly a national level. I felt like this is my best chance to get in and make a difference.
Okay, I was just going to ask, because obviously if engineering and that is by trade, where does the politics stem from? And I'm sure there's been a lot of discussion of, the name recognition, as you brought up. Did that have some appeal? Did your dad actually have something to say, why don't you try it or go about it? Or did you just say, you know what? Yes, that is my name. However, I want to do this for myself.
I had brought it up to him over the past 3 or 4 years that I would like to run, and I guess I just never really thought it would turn out like that because I wasn't paying attention to how many years he had been in with the term limits. And finally, one day I had brought it up, and he said, well, maybe you can run if you want, and explained the situation to me, and I decided to go for it.
Well, and no regrets thus far?
Nope, none.
Well, of course, this is your freshman year, as I'd like to call it. Obviously, you've only been in there right now. It's obviously the 11th of the third month. Therefore, you've only been in about 2 months and change. How's the feeling? How's the seat? How are things going? How
it's going very well. But I feel like it's baptism by fire here. It's a lot of stuff you got to keep up on. A lot of things that I thought I could take for granted, I couldn't. It's a very large learning experience for me. The learning curve has just been huge at this point, but it's going well. The people up there are incredibly talented. The Republican staff, both parties, just absolutely make things wonderful for me.
Well, of course, the other hard part, other than going into it, was obviously getting there. And I'm sure your campaign wasn't an easy one at that, because again, with the name recognition, a lot of people were probably saying, well, you're just doing it by the name.
Sure.
And that may have been for some people's minds, but how did you go about doing it to set yourself aside that I am Lewis Blessing III? I am the new 28th District.
Sure. Well, you just put yourself out there. The district, even before the redistricting, those areas tended to be pretty conservative. And myself being pretty conservative, I just felt like I would continue on with that message and let that stand on its own. Because people, I think, aren't so much swayed by name as they are if the politicians have the same beliefs that they do.
So you didn't feel that at all when you were out campaigning and going door to door and them seeing the name, thinking of one thing, and then you showing up, they're like, wait a minute.
Well, I got to admit to you, there was a lot of houses, especially in Coleraine, where I've lived forever. My dad's lived almost for forever. I'd knock on doors and they'd know who I am. I knew your father for years and years and years. But I would talk with them, and a lot of times they were on the same page with my beliefs and where I stood.
Well, let's get into that, your beliefs. As the new representative of the 29th District, where would you like to see the 29th District go? And as for that matter, the state of Ohio.
Well, I'd like to see more limited government for sure. I feel like the government causes more problems than it actually solves. I'm trying to think of particular. Do you have any particular?
Not at this point, but maybe what's going to be coming out may just spur that.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, limited government, conservative beliefs. I'm just trying to think of a good. I'm used to talking about.
Sure. That's fine. That's understandable. No, but again, with this being your first, I can understand. This is something new, and as you say, it is a learning curve. And of course, with new things are coming out, obviously, the new things that are coming out is the biennium budget. That's just come out. Your thoughts on that at this point? I mean, this is your first one really to look at and delve into. We've had people here on the roundtable who've been here a number of times and said, well, we're used to seeing this and this and this. This is brand new, fresh and clean for you. What are your thoughts when you've received this lengthy document?
It's not too bad.
That's not bad this year,
That's just the highlights.
Good point.
It's kind of a mixed bag. I mean, there's a lot of things in there the governor does that are done well, but then there's others you're just like, I don't know about. Now, granted, there hasn't been a lot of testimony on it, so
fair.
Really the elephant in the room is the Medicaid expansion right now, and I the research that I do with that, it just seems like a lot of people don't know where it's going. A lot of the numbers are based on just myriad assumptions, and you can't really get a good grasp of how much it's going to cost to do that. So I struggle a lot with that at the moment.
And understandable, because again, if you can't give somebody a concrete number, how can you explain to them?
Right.
And with something like that. I have not gone through all of it myself, and I'm sure that you have seen more of the highlights than us. Are we looking at something that is going to be bringing us, Ohio, to that next level and that next step where we need to be, where we thought we would be maybe 2 years ago or 4 years ago?
Maybe not. The goal, whether people agree with Medicaid expansion or not, the goal is to cover people who can't afford it on their own, or have sicknesses or illnesses and they just can't care for themselves. Everybody agrees that those people need to be treated. It's just the implementation that we're arguing over. And right now, you kind of look at it and it's like, man, I don't know how expensive this is going to be. And no matter what, when you expand, you're covering more people. It's going to cost more.
Yeah, fair. And of course, with an expansion like that, where is the funding coming from is always going to be the next question.
Actually, it's good that you bring that up. The way they're doing this, and it's the reason the governor wanted to go with Medicaid expansion, is that the federal government will pay for 100% of it the first 3 years, and it will taper off to 90% by 2020. But the question that a lot of the conservatives have is, okay, what if the feds renege on that deal? You don't know.
Wow. And then where does that leave the state at that point?
That's correct. Now, the governor also has said in his highlights that if the feds renege on it, they pull the funding, then we're going to opt out. But how do you opt out? You now have people that are, have been covered for a few years, and are you just going to pull their coverage away from them now that they're uncovered? I mean, how can you do that?
Which then begs the other question, which is the bigger risk, pulling out or staying into a program that may dwindle funds even further?
Yeah, it's catch-22.
It's catch-22. And again, I know we're as we like to do sometimes, stare into that crystal ball. And obviously this is something we can't see until we get things implemented. And obviously that won't be for a while. And good evening. It is April 8th, 2013, and I'd like to welcome you to yet another edition of the Columbus Report, your inside look at all things the state of Ohio. I'm very fortunate to have with me Senator Bill Seitz sitting here at the roundtable.
Jason, it's great to be with you.
Glad that you could join us today. Something seems to be missing, of course, and we're glad to see that you are with us, minus mustache, but we're still happy.
After 41 years, I shaved my mustache a few weeks ago, but I'm still the same person.
You are still the same, all the same, and everything is all the same still here at the round table. So, welcome once again.
Happy to be here.
And glad that you're here because we're 2 months away out from what was a very interesting State of the State address given in Lima. Your thoughts, concerns, or questions when it came to the new law of the land here?
Well, you know, the governor has a right to unveil his agenda, and typically that's what the State of the State is for. So he put forward a very bold agenda, but it's our job then to make our own revisions to that agenda and see if the big, bold ideas that he advanced really work. The House is now doing that. They should have a budget out in the next 10 days and voted on out of the House, hopefully within the next 10 days. Then our time in the Senate is very limited because since we have to have a balanced budget by June 30th,
right,
we have to leave the month of June open to resolve differences between the House and Senate on what form the budget should take. So that basically compresses our work time, our framework, into about 5 weeks, which is going to be an awful lot of heavy lifting in only 5 weeks. And of course, we don't know as we sit here tonight what the House is going to do. I've heard some informed speculation on some of the major components, what they're likely to do, but we don't know yet. So we'll just have to see what they come up with.
And here they are. They had roughly almost 2 months to kind of play with. You're getting 5 weeks.
Yes.
This may not be unprecedented, but let's hope that we can get some resolution.
Yes, it puts an awful lot of pressure on the Senate to work through all those issues because this budget, unlike most budgets, contains all sorts of, frankly, non-budget related issues.
Sure.
We have major tax reform proposals in this budget that are truly not needed in order to balance the budget. We are running a surplus. We have about $1.7, $1.8 billion surplus in our rainy day fund, and that's great news considering that it was only 89 cents 3 short years ago.
I was just going to say, not long ago, we were calling in where is our reserves.
Correct. So now we have a very robust reserve, and the governor proposes to do still more tax reform, and he's come up with a very complicated proposal that on the one hand reduces income tax rates and sales tax rates. On the other hand, it extends the sales tax to some 82 different services previously not subject to Ohio sales tax. And that proposal, while well-intentioned, is probably not going to pass because there are way too many complications to try to extend that sales tax to legal services, accounting services, engineering, architecture, business-to-business services, advertising, cable television, bowling, haircuts, beautician services. I've found in my 13 years that most Ohioans don't really care what the sales tax rate is.
Okay, good point.
But they care very greatly when we extend the sales tax to something that was previously not subject to the sales tax. In some cases, the governor's proposal doesn't even work. I talked to a fellow who runs coin-operated laundries in apartment buildings.
Okay.
The machines are built to take quarters. It's 4 quarters for a load.
Yeah.
Well, you can't charge them $1.05 because the machines only take quarters. So what is he going to do if this passes? He's either going to charge everyone $1.25, which is 20 cents more than he needs to pay the 5-cent sales tax,
right,
or he's going to have to eat that 5 cents himself, leave the price at $1. It simply won't work. So the one thing that I'm reasonably certain of is that the governor's proposal to expand the sales tax to all these previously untaxed services is not yet ready for prime time and will not be part of the budget. Now, the corollary to that is you can't take the good with the, you have to take the good with the bad.
Absolutely.
And that means we will have to likely scale back the governor's proposal for a further 20% reduction in income tax rates that he proposes to put in over the next 3 years. Now, that 20% reduction in income tax rates would take our maximum income tax rate in Ohio from the current rate, which is just a little below 6%, down to the new rate over 3 years, which would be just a little bit under 5%. Most Ohioans, you and me, aren't paying anywhere near 6%.
Good point.
Because that high rate only applies to people that are making more than $250,000 a year, which I don't think you are.
If only.
Yeah, which you and I are not making. So for most Ohioans, the average income tax rate applied to their income is about 3%. So a 20% reduction in those rates, like the governor proposes, is really not going to do a whole lot for you. Just figure it out. Now is tax season. It'd be a real thing to do. Take your 1040 and figure out what would be a 20% reduction in the amount of Ohio income tax you pay. And my guess is for most of us in the Forest Park, Springfield Township area, Coleraine, it'll be a very modest number. So we will have to scale that income tax cut back if we do not do the sales tax base broadening. And then the next question is, well, what do we do? The governor has proposed a couple things that seem to enjoy widespread support. One of the things that he's proposed is a substantial income tax deduction for sole proprietorships, limited liability companies, limited liability partnerships, and other small businesses. Since small business drives our economy in Ohio, giving them a special tax deduction has a lot of merit, in my opinion. And I think we can afford to do that by leaving the sales tax rate in Ohio at the current 5.5% rate, not cutting it to 5%, and then using that extra money to fund this small business tax cut, which I think has a lot of merit.
And I think we have seen, especially with the boom of the past economic problems, that the small business owner is the one that's starting to re-emerge as the survivor.
Well, that's right.
And to be able to offer and to say, Ohio's the place to be.
Right.
Why not do something
Right.
to that effect?
You know, Jason, we have a lot of programs in Ohio that appeal to big business. There are some tax credits and some important tax breaks that big business gets. And that's important. They provide a lot of jobs too. But small business is what drives the economy. It's creating 70 to 80% of all new jobs. The small business person is the one that is most adversely affected by unnecessary government regulations, by the extra costs coming down the pike through Obamacare. And therefore, giving that person a break, as the governor proposes to do on his small business tax cut proposal, seems like a good idea to me.
Are you thinking that we're going to be seeing a little more of this red tape reduction? Because that's what it sounds like it is.
We certainly want to try to do that. We created, as you know, in the 2011 budget and a separate bill, we created the Common Sense Ohio Initiative. And that is a new mechanism for weeding out duplicative and unnecessary and redundant and overburdensome regulations on small business, which we very charitably describe as any business employing fewer than 500 people. So any new regulation that is proposed must go through this process. And now we have the ability to put thumbs down on new regulations that unduly burden small business. Anyone having fewer than 500 employees is now subject to this great new test, and we think it is slowing the pace of new regulations, and we'll soon see a reduction in existing regulations, and that's all to the good. Our Lieutenant Governor Mary Taylor is running that program, and I think she's doing a fine job in that regard.
So it sounds like we're actually going to see, hopefully, some growth, be it in all facets.
Right. We're seeing it now. We're seeing it now. In fact, in Ohio, we're seeing one large area of growth is far from us here in southwest Ohio. It's in eastern Ohio, where they've discovered mountains and mountains of natural gas and oil. And that is the so-called fracking dispute, the new methodologies that now exist to extract oil and gas that was previously inaccessible because it was embedded deep in shale rock formations. And they've now come up with new technologies that allow us, in effect, to shake that shale and release that oil and gas up to the surface. So it is a great new development for Ohio. Land prices are booming out there in eastern Ohio. New jobs are being created there. Home prices are going up. They're really experiencing a great boom in eastern Ohio, and we have to find a way to make sure that those developments benefit the whole state. So one of the things Governor Kasich has proposed, and I'm sort of at odds with my Republican colleagues on this, he wants to increase the rate of tax that we assess on oil and gas producers for extracting that oil and gas out of the ground. Currently, Ohio's rate is ridiculously low. It is about 20 cents per barrel of oil. 20 cents. A barrel of oil.
Drop in the bucket, so to speak.
A barrel of oil now sells for anywhere between $90 and $100 a barrel, and our current tax rate is only 20 cents. Well, he has proposed a modest increase in the tax rate for hydraulically fracked oil and gas. And even if that tax becomes law, we will still have a lower severance tax rate here in Ohio than do any of the major other oil-producing states, states like Oklahoma, Texas, North Dakota, where you see a big boom similar to what we're now seeing in Ohio. We will still be lower than them. So therefore, I generally support what the governor is trying to do in that regard, because that is a way of having the out-of-state oil and gas companies share some of this tremendous wealth with we here in Ohio. The alternative is to let them take all that money back to Texas, back to Arkansas, wherever they're from, and we get not much. So I support, generally speaking, what the governor wants to do. Unfortunately, it appears that that proposal, too, is not likely to survive the General Assembly's budget process, and it looks as though the House is not going to go along with that proposal either.
And good evening. It's May 13th, 2013. I'd like to welcome you to yet another edition of the Columbus Report. We're all decked out in our summer attire. Well, not necessarily. I'm a little chilly, but Connie Pillage is here from the 28th District, joining us at the round table tonight. Connie, glad you could join us.
I am so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, you get to start off the summer-spring festivities with us. We've gone through our rotation, and we welcome you back as always. And we are at little less than a month from what big news has happened, and of course the budget has passed through the House. We talked last month with Senator Seitz, and he had already obviously had passed it on to you guys to do what you needed to do. An increase over $7 billion now in this budget. Your thoughts and concerns?
Well, the party of self-proclaimed fiscal responsibility and fiscal conservatism has now increased our state budget $10 billion. The budget I voted on in 2009 was about $50.5 billion, and the one, so it's even more. The one that we're looking at now is over $61 billion, so a little over $10 billion more. And we don't really know what the Senate will do with it, but it's a giant leap, I'll tell you. $7 billion increase. I don't know of any other larger increase in the history of the state.
Wow. So obviously one of the major points that came out of this was the school funding issues. One of many.
Yeah. And we've been talking about school funding for years.
We have, and we've never seen that glimmer of hope. And when you get the budget, you kind of hope that you're going to open that, what was it, 180 pages, 130 pages worth of documentation to read?
4,500 pages.
4,500 pages.
Yeah, 138,000
I'm just a few
lines.
off.
Yeah.
You know.
Just double-sided, pretty big document.
And Mr. Kasich rolls out Achievement Everywhere.
Yeah.
Where does Achievement Everywhere get us? I mean, I have my talking points, that some good things that it does do, but there are still some things that we still have to question about school funding and where is it going and why.
Well, as you mentioned, it's a big budget. Education was a big part of it. And there were many dramatic changes in the governor's version of the budget. A lot of those were taken out, but one of the changes he created was addressing school funding, which did nothing to make our system of funding schools constitutional. I've not seen any opinion anywhere that it would pass constitutional muster. Indeed, local communities continue to go back to the local taxpayers to pay for schools. And this is exactly what the Supreme Court said was wrong with our system of funding schools. And John Kasich and now the Ohio House Republican caucus has done nothing to fix that.
So as you're saying, obviously we're paying the burden. One of the things that it was supposed to do, and of course the big part was the voucher expansion program. Was that necessary, truly?
Well,
I mean,
supposedly,
well, it is supposed to, as from what I understand, that is becoming a little more state funded, a little less on the taxpayer, but more on the state. Why so?
Well, that's of course we all, you and I, through our state income taxes and sales taxes, we put all that money into the state general revenue fund, and that's going to pay for education. So the voucher program, by expanding it, what used to be what originally started, we had a couple different programs. One was to help children with special needs who needed special services because of their special needs. One of those was to take care of that, and then the other voucher was to help children in low-performing schools whose parents were poor, to get them into what they perceived were higher-performing private schools. Okay. Although they don't have the same testing that the public schools, and they don't have the same accountability measures that public schools do, but it would have been good at some of our wonderful parochial schools, and others used this means to start up new for-profit charter schools, and therein lies the problem. So that started out, I would really like to see us invest in all of our schools rather than try to pull the best students out of some of the schools, but I understand that parents are concerned.
Sure.
That's changed now. So this new expansion removes the requirement that it be an underperforming school. So we have all these solid school districts, many of them in mind, like Winton Woods, like Reading, Sycamore, Princeton, Indian Hill, Madeira. Parents can use that money to pull their kids out of a performing school, a state-funded school that meets the needs of their child, and pull them out for no reason at all, and send that money to a private school.
Now, as you say, meets the needs. That sounds very to the discretion of the parent, obviously. Obviously, they're not looking at some of the school districts that we have, as you're saying, Winton Woods, Indian Hill. These are some very good local school districts. And now we're just pulling kids out, putting them elsewhere. On their own behalf, they choose to do this.
Right.
However, what then happens to the school now that these kids have left? Because you've probably seen a lot of people aren't coming to these districts.
Right. Well, let's look at, for instance, a school district like Princeton.
Okay.
They don't get a lot of this state share of the money that everybody talks about. They get a little bit, and I don't have my journal in front of me, so let's say it's $500 a student. I think it's less than that, but we'll just say it's $500 a student. If a student goes to another school, that school district, Princeton, still doesn't pay just that $500 to follow the student. They pay over $5,000 to follow the student. So they lose big time.
Now, if we look back to last year, even 2 years ago, that's when Princeton was hit very hard with some very major decisions, a lot of cuts and a lot of pain on the school district as well as the students.
They laid off, what was it, over 100 teachers?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's not great for the students because that means we're going to have fewer programs and increased class sizes. And we're seeing this play out all across the state. You know, in my mind, education is the #1 investment we need to make. It changes everything. It changes the life of a student, it changes the life of a community, and it sets the economic tone for the state. It tells outside business interests what we envision for the future of our state. It says we have a long-term investment in the state. And will you allow me to tell a story?
Go for it.
Okay, I want to tell you an education story.
Okay.
A constituent of mine named Paul Forshee was born on a subsistence farm in Appalachia.
Okay.
They ate, they slaughtered their hogs every Thanksgiving. They grew all their food. Dad worked in the coal mine for a little bit of money for the family. He went to a 3-room schoolhouse for grades 1 through 8, all in 3 rooms, pot-bellied stoves, outhouses. It was like the 19th century. Everybody was a farmer. It was very, very basic stuff. But he had, lucky for him, he had a great high school math teacher named Mary Slater who inspired him to encourage him to go on to college. And he went on to college. Of course, he had absolutely no money, so he got grants and Pell Grants and worked. And he went on to college, got his bachelor's degree, and he just kept on going because he knew his only ticket out of that poverty was an education. And it's not like the poverty we have here. I mean, they didn't have cable TV and more than one car. I mean, they milked the cows for food. All right, so it was very, very...
We're talking close to Little House on the Prairie here.
Yeah, except they had 12 kids.
Okay.
12 kids. So when I see... so he got a job here in Cincinnati and married and settled down, had his family, married a legislator and who's fighting for education. So, when I think about what my husband went through because he had one fabulous teacher who caught him, who found something in him, that's what we need to do. I mean, he's had a big impact on a large consumer products company in Southwest Ohio. And the products that we all use, they make. Because of people like him. He's not the only one there that came up like that.
No, but it's the idea that it takes one spark to push someone forward.
Right. And that's what public schools ought to be able to do. It's happened in Appalachia for this guy and all of his brothers and sisters and many of his cousins too. But we need to remember that is what has built companies like P&G, GE, Endo at the Con, all these great blue chip companies and other manufacturers throughout Ohio. That,
As I said, not just here
Yeah.
locally, but statewide. You know, we
Yeah.
do have to look that way. And good evening. It's June 10th, 2013, and I'd like to welcome you to yet another edition of the Columbus Report. We are live tonight and very fortunate to have with us at the round table Representative Connie Pillich of the 28th District. Connie, welcome back.
So glad to be here. Thank you.
It seems like only yesterday we were here.
It does.
It is so true. We had promised at the end of that show that we would come back and discuss a few things, and it just so happened that this month opened up that we could continue that conversation. So, welcome back.
Thank you.
You're
Thank
very
you so
welcome.
much.
Of course, this is a live evening, so I'd encourage you to all join in. If you weren't with us the last time, well, come on aboard this time. 825-3971 is our phone number. Live at waycross.org is the email address. All your questions answered here tonight. Come on and join the fun. Of course, when we last spoke, we were discussing so many different things, and some things we'll touch back on. But of course, the last thing we discussed, which was probably the most fun thing that we were starting to discuss, was your progression with the Ohio Service Corps to introduce a new fellowship to help volunteerism within the state of Ohio. Where are we today? Now, last you were just in those talking moments with the John Glenn School and a couple other areas. Where are we today?
Well, my idea for the Ohio Service Corps was to build upon my commitment to public service and to attract graduating college seniors into public service. You know, I have a military background, so I'd love everyone to go in the military, but that's not going to happen. But there are so many other ways you can give back to your community, and keeping people here in Ohio to help in a nonprofit would be one way. And I had introduced legislation to create an Ohio Service Corps to attract these young college graduates, let them work for 2 to 3 years, and we would pay them a tiny little bit of money and then help pay down their student debt. So I introduced that last session, and I was getting ready to introduce it this session, but the Ohio Commission on Service and Volunteerism learned about the bill and came to see me. And so they're very interested, and they decided to run with it. Okay. Before I introduced it again, they decided to create a fellowship based on this model. And so the initial discussions we had last time I was here was just the very beginning of bringing different people. We had the Ohio Nonprofit Association, we had the John Glenn School, we had the Commission on Volunteerism, Service and Volunteerism, and me in the same room talking about how we could shape this. So now the gears are working and we're in a planning stage.
Excellent.
And we hope that something like this can be up and kicking maybe by next year.
That'd be great. Now, is this something that has happened before, that someone hears of a bill, maybe not to this, whichever degree, and actually says, no, before you do that, let's talk about this and let's create something different? Because now you're outside of, from what I'm gathering, is outside that legislative body a little bit, and now it's in a nonprofit status as opposed to where you may have led it if it would have gone to the House.
Yeah, of course the difference is if I had introduced legislation and if it had passed, it would be a law that we must have this. Although the way I worded it, it was a little bit looser than that.
Sure.
But it would create the structure. By not having, there's nothing in the laws that prevent anyone from doing this. So the idea came up, and the Commission on Service and Volunteerism thought it was a great idea. And so they started pulling people to the table. And so I'm very hopeful that it'll go forward. And you're absolutely right. This is outside the legislative realm, and I'm really glad it is, because let's try it out. Because it does sometimes take a little while to pass a bill.
Well, and it is something, again, that I've not seen that has happened in this regards. We're now
You're going to see it again.
Oh, are we?
Later today.
And how is that? We'll come back on that one then.
Yeah, but it's great that this agency, this government agency, decided to just take it and walk forward with it. And I'm really, really pleased that they're working on it, and that's great.
Now, of course, we're talking about something called Ohio Service Corps. The name will probably change. It's something that we can at least use as a discussion point. When people hear it, people probably think, or at least I did, think that it's similar in the regards to the Peace Corps or something like that, but obviously Ohio-based. What are we looking for some of these high school, college graduates to go out and do?
Well, that's the key. So what the coordinator of this program, and this fellowship would probably be coordinated by the John Glenn School, which already does some of this stuff because it's a public policy school. They would coordinate with different nonprofits in Ohio, and that's why the Nonprofit Association executive director is at the table. They would find places that have a need for a young college graduate who has a degree, so therefore has credentials and has a willingness and a desire and an eagerness to serve, to be in public service and to do this cheaply. For the nonprofit, it may be
especially
free.
for working with nonprofit, absolutely.
So it may be cost-free to the nonprofit, or they may donate. We don't know the final picture yet, so they may subsidize some of it. But, they get a person for 2 years, and that's a significant chunk of time, and maybe 3 years if the young person wants to do that. It's a significant amount of time that they can train them to fill a position for a pretty good amount of time. Like when you have a summer intern, you barely get them trained, and then you lose them back to their school. So it's a little bit more challenging.
If you get them for 6 to 8 weeks, you're right. You may get them up to speed. They may not understand all of your terms and policies, but as you're saying, 2 years?
Yeah, they can do real work instead of intern level work. They can do real professional work. And so the hope is that that when the Glenn School starts seeking out partners, they reach out to all the nonprofit agencies in the state. We know who they all are. They were all registered. And we talk to them about developing a position that a participant would be able to fill.
So as we were saying earlier, that this is something we're hopeful to see possibly next year. You're talking not school year 2013-2014, but maybe school year 2014-2015.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So really, if it's be for a graduate, so whoever graduates in 2014, it's a little hard to know how long it will take to plan it because it takes resources to plan this. But I think if we put a good plan together, I think it'd be wonderful. My vision. I'm a big fan of public service.
Yes.
I grew up in a family where public service is what we did, and I didn't know there was any other way to live. And that's why I joined the Air Force. That's why I did Volunteer Lawyers for the Poor. That's why I ran for office. But I think it enhanced my life in such a great way, and I hope that I've given back to the community. And I think so many young people would get so much out of it, become better citizens, no matter what career path they take afterwards, if they started out doing this. And that's the best time. I think there are probably 2 times for people to volunteer, right after college or after they retire.
I think that's
when they have
fair.
The most time.
The most time to do it. And dare I say, at that point, not a lot of... They have a little more play time to be able to say, yes, this is working, no, this isn't, as opposed to, say, maybe going into your latter years before retirement, when playing around like that's probably not the wisest decision, especially in the economy that we're in.
Right, yeah. People have families, they've got to work, yeah. But when you're young and you're used to being poor because you're a college student, it's a good, let's be poor a couple more years and do some good work.
An extra couple dollars for ramen noodles is always a good thing.
That's right, that's right.
Now, obviously, we're talking about most nonprofits, so this sounds like it can range from any kind of service. We're not just talking, I'm going to use the proverbial Peace Corps digging ditches. We're talking from technical sides to clerical sides to anything.
They could be working at Gorman Heritage Farm over in Evendale, raising chickens, or they could be up in Cleveland at the Cleveland Clinic, doing research or something like that. It could be so many things, and it would be up to each nonprofit organization to decide what kind of position could be filled, and then present it to the John Glenn School. And I think it's a great idea.
It's I can see the excitement in your eyes, and I can see that it is definitely a project that you really cannot wait to move forward. Again, we know when we're hoping for a goal date on those. It sounds like you're looking at a 2-year commitment for this individual. Now, obviously, you still have a lot of things to work out, and of course, my first thing is, well, what if something doesn't work out in regards to the student? I mean, I'm assuming these are probably things we'll discuss later as things implement. But my first thought is, what happens if sometimes jobs don't work out right?
Well, that's something that will have to be decided. But first of all, the application process is going to be competitive because there's not going to be a large number of these positions available in the beginning. So, my dream of everyone going into public service for 2 years after high school or college would, we're not there yet. But,
No.
But so, there may be 20. So they're going to be pretty competitive, and it's going to be someone who really wants to succeed. And the Glenn School will have the task of fitting people appropriately, given their academic pursuits, their hobbies, their extracurriculars, fitting it with that nonprofit. And, yes, people don't always work out, and then they would have to be replaced.
Sure.
But I think if it's done carefully, it's going to be rare. But the key, I think, here is having someone for 2 years or even 3, if that's what they wanted to do. That's such a significant amount of time that they can be a real valuable asset to that nonprofit organization.
Good evening. It's August 12th, 2013, and I'd like to welcome you to yet another edition of the Columbus Report. I'm Jason Grisgoric, Waycross Community Media Government Access Coordinator and your host for this evening. I'm very fortunate to have with me at the round table Representative Lou Blessing from the 29th District. Mr. Blessing, glad that you can join us.
Glad you're having me.
Thank you. Of course, now of all times, my emailing decides to play music when we tell people to turn their phones off. But if you'd like to join in tonight, because that's what we're going to do here tonight, is discuss all things, kind of want to call it the post-season or summer break, because we're almost done with the summer break in your neck of the woods, which is the right time. So we'll be discussing that and a lot more. And if you're here joining us on August 12th, give us a call, 825-3971, or join us with the email, live@waycross.org. I promise music will not play while your email is being read. So, Mr. Blessing, we have finally made it through, almost through, September 18th, 19th is when you go back into session.
Correct.
And so this will be your first summer break.
Yes.
You've made it this far, and not to say that you were going to give up ship, but how has the first term been thus far, especially going through the infamous biennium budget?
It has been an absolutely wonderful learning experience. The stuff that I have seen, it's just incredible. A lot of my strongly held beliefs have been in some ways shattered just actually seeing how it's done. They liken the process to making sausage, and it's not exactly the most appealing process, but I certainly enjoyed it.
And we obviously have a passed budget now, and we were talking earlier, there's a lot of give, take, and push and pull, but how do you feel where we are with the budget? Obviously, it has been passed, so we can't go back on anything, but looking back at your first situation here, your thoughts on the budget, where we're going to go in the next 2 years, and what you foresee?
Actually, I think it was a good budget. Well, for one, we had Ron Amstutz from Worcester, who has just been an incredible finance chair, very, very wise. He's had over 30 years experience in the House and the Senate. I know that there were some complaints that, we did increase spending, 14.6% for the General Revenue Fund, but a lot of that, if not most of it, is education and Medicaid spending. Some funding for local government was restored. Spent some more money in education, but in the scheme of things, we're still financially stable and moving forward as a state.
And you've hit on the three main points that we always like to discuss, and of course the big one we'll start with is local government, because that's what we obviously have a very good touch with here is our local government. Obviously the local government fund was removed not too long ago.
And the estate tax. And you're now letting us know a little bit that some of it's being restored, but it's nothing to the comparison of what we used to have. Where is this funding coming from, and where will local government see it first? That's a good question. I know that, well, besides that, there was one other thing that I wanted to bring up that,
Sure.
that people might want to look at. The state is no longer paying 12.5% of the property taxes on new or replacement levies for local
That's right, they
governments.
did change that as well.
And that'll be interesting how that impacts local governments.
Because is that not also the legislation in which if it is a renewal, the difference between the renewal and a new levy?
Right. If
Okay.
if you renew it for the same amount, you're okay. You still get the
Your
rollback.
kind of grandfathered in, but anything new
Correct.
is without the 12%.
That's right. So that's a pretty big cut.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah, it's a very big cut. And I'm assuming that's probably going to change some people's local government's minds and viewpoints on what to do with upcoming levies, especially in 2014.
Fortunately, it's going to mean more budget tightening. I know in Coleraine Township, they've debated putting a police levy on the ballot.
Yes.
I mean, a lot of them are strapped for cash, and quite frankly, you have a governor who, sees fit to cut the local government fund and the estate tax. I mean, it's really difficult to put some of that money back into local governments with that kind of climate.
If you were to stare into your crystal ball, do you foresee at some point a difference where some type of local government, maybe this is the start, but maybe some funding going back to the local governments?
Sure, it's all cyclical. I mean, this will just ebb and tide for years. It's just a philosophical debate. So I don't know when that would be, but I would imagine at some point it would be restored to a certain degree.
And I'm sure every government official is hoping and praying, because I know we
I can't
hear
blame
that.
them.
Yeah.
But everybody's belts are tightening. I mean, they talk about there being a recovery. I certainly don't feel it. I know a lot of our constituents aren't feeling a recovery, and again, just times are tough.
Yeah, like you said, in Coleraine Township, and that being your home base,
You got it.
we do see they're talking police and fire at some point, and here we are, and I believe it's the fire levy, police levy that they're year 6 in a 5-year levy, and they're not the only ones.
Sure.
This is our personal tie, but there are others out there that are probably in that same situation.
Oh, absolutely.
And as we know, and you well know, is that protection of the people is of utmost importance when it comes to local governments.
Right.
So we shall see as that goes along. Of course, our other big topic being education. Education is always a hotbed topic when it comes to the budget. Everything from more funding to less funding and spending. We are seeing more funding going towards education. This is a positive sign, I foresee, especially in the last 2 years. So where will this bring us now that more funding is going towards education?
It's funny, actually, when the governor released his budget back in February, he talked about how we've almost doubled the amount of education funding since 1997, but there has been very little impact on performance results. And I know that we've had, obviously, since then, Senate Bill 5, which of course riled up the teachers' unions, and yeah, there's more spending going into education, but I'm just not so sure that that's the right thing, because teachers make a great impact in students' lives, but at the end of the day, if the parents are not involved in the children's education, you're going to have a lot of problems. So teachers can go so far, but really I think we should be looking in tandem with the increase in funding at getting parents more involved, getting students more active. I mean, you can look at any high school, it seems, that students are more interested in athletics, drama, you name it, but academics just isn't as popular as it should be. And I think the parents play a much bigger role than they've been given credit for.
I think you are one of 2 people that have ever brought the parent role into the educational aspect of it. Most people say, the teachers need to be paid so that they can continually teach, and which is true.
Sure.
There's no denying that. However, you're saying work in tandem,
sure.
make them work together. Is that something the state can kind of force? I mean, it is a question that you don't necessarily say a parent-teacher bill, but is that something that the state can help nudge along?
Possibly. I wouldn't want to ever force anybody into doing
Sure.
anything. It's just something that you would want to lead by example. Show that, if the parents are more involved, perhaps have some, studies done on the matter to show that, hey, there is some truth to this. The teachers go this far, but, getting the parents involved will take it this much further. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that, and I think the state could definitely play a role in that. But the feds would probably ultimately be the ones to.
And of course, I want to thank all of you for joining us as well. I hope you found this as entertaining and informative as possible. If you're interested in becoming a volunteer, please do so because we love our volunteers. All of these productions are done by people just like you. I'm Jason Grzgorek, Waycross Community Media's Government Access Coordinator, giving you that opportunity to talk to those in the know in the state on the Columbus Report. Have a great summer, and we'll see you next time.